Hello and welcome to the weird world of knowing. This is a very exciting podcast for me because this is really all about the subject matter that I find absolutely fascinating. So first of all, what is the weird world of knowing? And it's where we're going to discuss these really strange and wonderful connections with our own body and mind. Why do we trust gut instincts? What are gut instincts? Where do these light bulb moments of knowing you're absolutely right or wrong come from? Who has these weird moments? And why I feel it's important we make the weird world of knowing more normal. So, first of all, we have a really beautiful guest with us today, Bill MacAllister-Lovatt. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. It's wonderful and how we can contribute together, how to get better than that.
Oh, absolutely. We connected last year, didn't we, on a beautiful course, and we had a really beautiful connection because it really was all about science and consciousness. And we went off into I went off into the woods, and you had to read sort of my mind as to what was actually happening. You were exceptional at this, really, Bill. Where's Bob come from? Bob is with us obviously today as well, but you were really exceptional in actually reading everything that was going on. And this is part of something called remote viewing, which we're not really going to talk much about today, but just to give an example of sort of what this weird thing is that we're talking about. Just explain, Bill, sort of what happened as I went into the woods. I was just walking along, and we'd got this plan of walking along into this little patch of land, and then we had to think about something from the wood that we would send back with our thoughts, just our thoughts to you, and you would pick up on that. So what actually happened for you?
Well, basically, you were in the woods and I was in a separate room, and I had to pick up what was going on in the woods. So I had a blank sheet of paper, basically, and I had to describe in a visual, my drawings, nuts anyway, what you were doing. So for me, on one level, I could see, but I couldn't physically see. But it was the knowing what I had to put down on the piece of paper. And if I had to think about it, I think this is what you were doing, that would have completely and utterly gone. So you have to get your headspace out the way and not think about it and come from a different place to say, right, I know what she's doing. How do I describe it to myself? And that came from the intuition, that came from the knowing, but actually taking all the logic out of it, the logic and the reasoning, this is absolutely nuts. This will not happen. To actually say, right, let's just take yourself into a space. And it was like you were downloading the information. And then I had to describe it from a visual point of view, what was going on. And out of that, I did that drawing where you were dancing in the forest like a ballerina and twisting round. On one level, I could see it. And on another level, I could actually feel it. And that's even more weird. And it's like, is this really going on? And I just put it down. I didn't think about it and then stopped. And then later on, when you come back, you went, what have you done? I went, my God, how did you do that? And I went, I don't know. And that's the beauty of it, because if you did know, you'd probably discombobulate yourself and think everything's so weird. So for me, it was a bit like my head was getting in the way. And I used the example of, I have to interrupt the logic signal in my brain to tell me what I'm doing is rubbish and switch it off. And that's not the easiest thing to do.
How
But
did you switch it off, just for the listeners?
okay then. So basically, I use the example. I sometimes get tinnitus, right? So sometimes it's really bad, and there's certain things you can do on the body, certain points. But on another level, when this first started, I was listening to Radio 1. All I could hear was Radio 1 in my head. I don't like Radio 1. It's too noisy, which was in my head. And I said, what can I do to get rid of the signal? Basically, I tuned into Radio 2, and Radio 2 cut off Radio 1. So therefore, I had no radio or noise come into my head. And that's what I do. There's lots of stuff you can do like this. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight. So basically, you're trying to interrupt the signal and destroy that signal by using another frequency and amplitude in your head to cancel it out. So basically, when we're doing the rational bit, the brain's coming in with one signal, and I have to bring another signal in to actually cancel it out. And that's what you have to do. And that's what happened.
I love that explanation. And what I was actually doing in the forest is we hadn't actually been told yet to actually send back the signals. So I was actually being a bit naughty, but I was having such a nice time, and it was a really blustery, windy day, and it was autumn, and the leaves were literally, they were falling around all around me. And as the leaves were falling, we were supposed to be walking very slowly, but I really desperately wanted to catch the leaves. So I was literally turning around, I suppose like a ballerina, really sort of grasping at these leaves to see how many I could catch along the walk. And that's obviously what you picked up on. But that's not, and actually, as I was doing it, I was actually saying, "Oh, Bill, this is really exciting. You're gonna really like this. These are just, this is just beautiful." And then I actually thought, "Oh, I think I'm sending this back too early. I hope I'm not confusing the signals." But you did then actually, when you were talking about changing that frequency, I think that was actually really quite pertinent to when I did actually start sending signals back to you, because I was then very much talking about this image that I had of a frequency wave between someone's legs. It just reminded me of what we've been talking about a big frequency wave. So when you were saying you consciously really needed to change that frequency, that really resonated with me, with that image of in between someone's legs, because there was a fire that was, they were stood near the fire, and the fire was literally like going up their body. So I think you picked up on more than you actually realized, and probably more than I did at the time. And until you think about it again afterwards, it's extremely interesting.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed the process as well. But however, there was more weird moments of knowing that you have here, Bob, because Bill, you know, I'm sure, Bill, that you actually have a middle name or someone who is with you called Bob, because this only happens to me when there is actually another entity or around. So I'd be interested to know
2
later.
weeks ago, I buried my best friend, Bob.
Right, okay. And this is those moments of knowing that literally happen as we are speaking. And it felt very important that I mention, and it's not normally something I would do, especially when we're live on a podcast, for me to actually say, okay, I feel like I need to mention that Bob is with us, but that felt very important that I mentioned it. And that's obviously why, because he is around, and you obviously need to know that. So thank you, Bob. And I hope now we can continue. Thank you very much. It's lovely to have you here too. Okay, so Bill, you have had a near-death experience that I think we'd be very interested to know about, because I think there's some really weird moments of knowing that you had through that process. Would you like to explain that to us?
Yes. So basically on the 27th of October, 2017, at 11:05, I was pronounced clinically dead. We had a bad day. We had to go up to London. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. We went to the hotel. More people turned up than we should. We ate late. We drank late. And at 11:05, this beautiful chocolate pudding arrived on my table. And my wife said, "Oh, that's a chocolate pudding to die for, dear." And I died in the chair at that moment in time.
What do you mean you died in the chair in that?
I died in the chair. Nothing happened. I just sat there. And she said, "You don't look very well, but that's a chocolate pudding to die for, dear." And I was dead in the chair.
What had happened?
I have no idea. Oh, I can tell you afterwards what happened. My vagus nerve shut down. My whole body shut down and said, "You've stretched yourself out. You've exhausted yourself. You have to reset yourself." Fortunately, there was people there. They emptied the restaurant. They took the tables out the way. They got me on the floor. Within 3 or 4 minutes, they got me back. They got a very, very faint pulse. The ambulance came. They took me to hospital, blue lights, police escort, the works, took me into the crash area. Whole team, I didn't know anything about this. Whole team was on me. They said to my wife, "Well, we've done everything we can." I was covered from head to foot in tubes, everything. They did the works. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, they said, "We don't know what's happening, but we've sent all these results to Australia." And my wife said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're sending everything you've done to Australia. He said, yes, because of the time difference, the doctors are awake. It's morning in Australia and we can get better feedback than all the tired doctors at night.
Oh, how interesting.
They've got this protocol. So basically they sent my wife home, and at 8:30 in the morning, I woke up in A&E and phoned her and said, what the hell is going on? I've been out having fun. Where the hell are you? But I was out having fun in the universe. I wasn't that. So basically I was just playing about. I was just playing about.
Okay, so for our listeners, what does playing about in the universe actually mean?
Well, it's interesting that it was like a multiverse. I could see all these beautiful colors. They've now found out the brain's got multi-universes in the brain. So I mean, I was flying all over the place, it's like, it's like the theory of everything. I was in the galaxies. I was going faster than bloody Star Trek, for God's sake. I was flying all over the place and looking at all the different colors and going into places I'd never seen before and seeing things I'd need before, seeing almost hyperspace, seeing these things going, oh, what's that? Oh, it's going really fast. Can I catch up with it? Well, actually, I was probably traveling faster than the speed of light because at that moment in time, there was no time.
Mhm.
So it's a human construct. So I just, oh, I'm going there. So I could go there. I could just, oh, I'll go there and see what's going on. So basically it was like this beautiful garden that I could build both horizontally and vertically and go in and look at it. It was like me having been back as a child with the periodic table. I had all these elements I could see, and what am I going to build differently? That's really, that's really, that didn't happen for a long while when I basically understood it, but that's basically it. Because as a child, I had the periodic table on my wall and I could tell you every element on the periodic table and how they all connected and interconnected. So when I was out there, I was interconnecting the periodic table to go and look at things in a different way.
Okay, so I would imagine you've blown quite a few people's mind by now. So I'm just going to do a very brief intro to Bill right now. So just so you have a little bit of background. So Bill McAllister-Lovatt is a program manager, a consultant, coach, regenerator, confidant, counsellor, trainer, and qualified systems engineer with over 25 years experience in pioneering and supporting personal and organizational change. He uses systems thinking, place-based leadership, storytelling, ecosystems, social values, and emerging business models. He also uses nature as a tool for facilitation and resource to build teams and resilience. So, Bill, bringing all this into context of actually where you are now and actually that explanation of the universe. Obviously, you've done a lot of engineering and it all makes perfect sense to you, but some of our listeners won't actually understand the fact that, okay, you've had a very near death experience. You've obviously, as you've been out, you've transitioned out of your body, or part of you has sort of gone off into this different world. It's gone off into the universe and had this very exploratory experience. Do you know how long that lasted for?
No, not really. Well, it lasted till I woke up, basically. So basically, if you think in linear time, it'd have been 9 hours.
What did it feel like?
Oh, it felt like I was a child again. I was being curious. It's like no one was telling me, you can't do this. This doesn't exist. Don't do that. Don't be so stupid and telling me something. How do you know that? It was like all these questions you get when you become an adult. Whereas when you're a child, can you tell me why this is going and what's going on? Because I'm curious. So that curiosity went to a completely different level when there was no duality, when there was no right or wrong. There was no yes or no. It was just like, just go with it. That really, for me, there was no judgment there at all.
Mm.
No, like there's no thing it's a stupid question. Well, there is no such thing as a stupid question. It's just a person may think they're stupid asking the question. And I know what that's like. I was always a person in the back of the room. Oh, if you're going to ask a question, just ask Bill because he'll ask something nobody else has asked. And they all
I
look
don't
at you
know.
and say,
I think
where
I'm
did you
just
get?
as nosy as you.
Yeah. And I've done it all my life. I've done it all my life. I've got no issue. Can I ask you a question? What don't you understand? Because your language is different from mine.
Exactly. And the audience has got their own language. And I think this is what's really important about what we're creating here is an understanding of everybody's weirdness, of everybody's weird bits, that your language might resonate with, you know, certain people, but discussing it with me, that might help blend it together a little bit easier for people who don't quite get your language but might get mine, or just blending it together, that's helping the process. So how did that experience affect you afterwards? Oh, did it? Yeah.
Afterwards, oh, it did afterwards. Bodily, I knew there was something wrong, but I lost my memory for about a month because we know the memory's not kept in here, it's kept outside. So my connections were a bit frayed. It was like my BT line wasn't quite working properly.
Mm.
There was a lot of interference on the line. So for me, I had to go and do this reconnection. So for me, I use memory palaces, a bit like what Sherlock does. I've done it for over 25 years. So basically, if I use the metaphor later, I can go into a filing cabinet, and in a filing cabinet, you have a folder with a name on it. So those names became blurred and obscured. I knew there was something in there, but I couldn't quite figure out what folder it was in. So I had to go and reconnect and rebalance with it. And that's what I had to do. And that took about 6 to 8 weeks to actually get that connection. But I knew it was all, yeah, it's like the filing cabinet's not quite coming out. The folder's not quite coming out because it was all fuzzy. And then I had to go and look at it in a different, so instead of going into directly, I had to go indirectly and go into a different route. And some things come up quicker than others. And I went, oh, but there's something behind it. So it was about rebuilding it. And that wasn't a problem to me because I do it all the time.
Can
When
you give us
I'm
an example of that, of what that practically means?
so basically, if I read a book, I mark it. And out of that, then I can turn it into a mind map. So I've got a blank sheet of paper and I'll have the title and author of the book in the middle. And then you start at 12 o'clock and you go right round the 24-hour clock. And out of that, you put key points of the book in it and you mark it. And then you flow. So basically you're making this huge, it's what nature does all the time. You know,
Well, it's very much like the clock system here. These this is a Chinese meridian clock,
yes,
into to sort of 12 meridians, and I would imagine it's a very similar process. It's a really natural process that
yes.
we follow. So that makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Everyone who's listening, come and let us know. We're really interested in your comments and thoughts about what Bill is talking about today. So do come and let us know your thoughts. So once you'd done that process, did you do that all on your own, or did you have help doing that? Did you need help doing that? Were you able to
No,
facilitate that all?
I went to see the doctor and they said, yes, you can't drive for a month. Just make sure you're okay. You know, to just get you back. And if anything happens, come back and tell us. So for a month, I couldn't drive, which was fine. And I said, right, I'm going to start go out walking again, which I did, and go and see the river, which I go and walk to every day. And I talk to the river because it's about flow. It's what Heraclitus says. You never go into the same river twice. So when you experience that experience, it's not the same. And that's one of the key things I do in my work. I talk about sense of place, your connectedness, and your flow states.
Mm.
So basically, when I died, my flow state went out the window, but I was flowing in a different way. And then it got all fuzzed up. So my river went down a different route.
And do you think that
You know, it's like
that
maybe the
river
river
that went
went
down
two
a different,
different routes and it
yeah,
has to come back again.
sorry to interrupt
No,
there.
carry on, carry on.
Think that that flow river that went off in that different route is because you either didn't want to fully come back, or you'd not quite landed back in your body fast enough, or what process do you believe happened there?
I think they were running in parallel, but it was divided because I died. That's the whole point. So basically, it's a bit like, what route do you want to go down to now? Because you've always said, I'm going down this route. Another route showed up. And in the end, they both came together when I come back. That's what I think.
Okay. So is this what you think as well? Let us know if what your views are on Bill's journey. You know, it's not going to affect Bill what your views are, because obviously this is Bill's experience and this is Bill's knowing. It's his personal weird knowing, and it's obviously very pertinent because he's experienced it. So his first-hand knowledge of experiencing this, you know, really, there is no argument. You just know that that's correct. Is that right?
I wouldn't say it's correct, because then you have to, yeah, you have to almost tick the box in a way. For me, it's about knowing and saying, right, that's okay. What can I learn from this experience? It's about a lived experience, and actually capturing the lived experience. And we need to do this more than ever. It's like we can put something in an email, we can put something and digitize it, but it doesn't collect or collate something like your lived experience and your knowing. And the bigger picture is, if we knew that better, we'd be in a much better place ourselves, both as an individual and the collective.
Okay, why doesn't that collection of information and literary, intelligence that is out there, why is that not as pertinent as individuals' experiences? Because I think a lot of people might disagree with that statement.
Well, I think at the moment we're going down the digital, the AI, the artificial intelligence, which is now the artificial or intelligent. It's actually a process. That's the whole point. I'll use the analogy. So I've got analog and digital, right? So I've got an LP, which is analog, and I've got a CD, which is digital, which is bits, zeros, and ones. Analog is completely different, but we're going to digital. But to learn what we want to do, we're using a converter to convert the digital into the analog. Now, along that process, we're going to lose something. So basically, for me, if I'm digitizing everything I know, you're just going to read it. It's two-dimensional. But from a collective point of view, I'm going to tell you about it. You're going to know how I feel about it, and I'm going to show you. So that lived experience of me being in the room and giving you that can be captured in 2D, but I'm actually knowing and telling you it in 3D or 4D or 5D, which is far more richer.
Super. And do you not think that AI is catching up with all of that?
No, not at all, because I just think AI is a process. That's all it is. It- I mean, what is intelligence? That's another question. By the way, this is your IQ today. Your IQ last year was differently. Does that mean you're capable? No, it's just an indication. It's about the human. The human is much more than just a box to say you're good at this, you're not good at that. And whether you have all these pieces of paper after you, whether you have a certificate of competence or incompetence, doesn't really matter. It's what you're bringing to the table. And then you have this circularity and this dialogue to say, right, why are we all here? What are we going to do? And what can you bring to the table that I can't bring? And that brings a greater awareness to what you want to build. Yes, there's things in AI we can give it an indication. We can say, here's a protocol, and we put 100 people in. This is what we're going to do to you. But individually, it might not work for, say, 10% of those people, because it hasn't captured that person's lived experience. So 10 people go in with a condition, right? Okay, AI says you've all got this condition. Here you go. So it's doing it at a higher level. But below all those levels, I'm coming with this condition because of where I live, because of my circumstances, because of my genetics, which is not taken into consideration. And that's part of the lived experience that has to be brought up to a higher level to say, this is how I want to be treated. And by the way, I want to be treated as an individual and not with a collective outcome. And that's about a power shift. That's a real power shift of giving the individual back to say, this is how I would like to be treated. How can you help me in this way?
Well, fantastic. I love all that, Bill. Thank you so much. I'm just going to briefly now say, what message would you give to your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
Have more fun.
Have more fun. Okay, fantastic. And who would you like to see on the weird world of knowing, or here on the weird world of knowing?
Apart from the dog.
Apart from the dog, who's obviously wanting to join in.
And I'd like to see someone who thinks completely opposite to me. I think that'd be a really good thing to do, and say, right, okay. And then it give you that perspective that there's no right or wrong here, but I'm coming from a different place. I'm coming from, this is what I'm bringing to the table. And I just think that'd be wonderful. And it's not about being right or wrong at all.
Anyone in particular in mind?
At this moment in time, they're not really. I'm sure I'm sure you can think of lots of people to do that. Jordan Peterson would be interesting, but I don't think you'd get him. But I think something, from a different polarity would be really interesting to do that. And then you could almost triangulate the conversation. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so very much. And I'm going to say thank you to Bob as well for joining us. And I am sorry, Bill, about the loss of your friend. It's very difficult for us when we're going through that transition, but I think we both know where Bob is and he's probably okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Weird World of Knowing, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening on The Weird World of Knowing. I do hope you enjoyed your time with us. I'm Rachel Nearing, your host, and gosh, I'm having a ball putting all of this together for you, so I hope you are too. And if you are, please do like, subscribe and share with those who might actually benefit from these weird moments of knowing as they realise how many of their own they've been having all their life. Take care and we'll see you next week.